All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode number 277 of the Restoring Rapport podcast. We are super excited for the content we've got planned out for you guys today, as always. This is a podcast for young believers who are pursuing the goal of marriage and family and trying to get married as young as possible in a healthy way. I'm your host, Seth Hensley. I come on twice a week, every week, to discuss not only the benefits of getting married young, but I try to equip and encourage you in your pursuit of that goal. And today we are going over a video about boundaries in marriage and why I personally don't have boundaries in my own marriage. Now, maybe you want to do things differently with your spouse, and I would love to hear your arguments for that and the reasons you've decided to do that in your future marriage. But if you're young and looking to get married, today I'm just going to present to you the idea that maybe boundaries aren't something that you should have with your spouse. And so I'm going to be reviewing a video today entitled Why Boundaries Have No Place in Marriage. Christian Moms React to Dr. Becky. And this was published and put on YouTube by Family Teams and Jeremy Pryor, who is somebody that I look up to personally greatly, but also somebody that I've shared a lot with you on the show. I've actually done a podcast with Jeremy. Our 19th podcast was an interview with Mr. Jeremy Pryor on the multi-generational family. You can go back and listen to that. And now I want to review this just because the title stuck out to me. Okay, I've never seen this, but prior to seeing this title stick out to me on YouTube, this past week and month, I had really been thinking, I don't have boundaries with my wife. I really don't. And it seems to me that boundaries are necessary in situations where the other party is dangerous to you or could cause you hurt and problems. That's when boundaries become necessary. Have you ever noticed that you really don't need boundaries with somebody who is actually really, 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 really respectful and has your best interest at heart? Usually you need boundaries to protect yourself from people who basically who aren't looking out for you. That's really what happens with boundaries. Like as a public school teacher, I'm really big into boundary enforcement. But that's because the students in my room can really sabotage my ability to teach. And they do, and they absolutely will, and they've proven that time and time again. That's the reason that I'm big into boundary enforcement in the classroom. Children, I'll be big into boundary enforcement as a parent, because what'll happen if I don't enforce boundaries is my children will grow up to be demons. They will grow up to be people who take and take and take and insist on having their own way and make everyone's life around them miserable if they don't get that way. And so that's a situation where boundaries are necessary and good and very important, because what happens without them is things fall apart, right? People trample over you. People will infringe on other people's happiness and just ability to function. They will charge over anything in their way. That's the kind of people you need boundaries with. Okay? Your spouse is not that kind of person, or ideally shouldn't be. I mean, nobody wants a spouse like that. And so if you're very careful in, your vision for your marriage, you can actually, I believe, craft a marriage where boundaries are not only, irrelevant and not necessary, but there would be no reason for you to put them in place, and they would actually hinder your ability to connect with your partner. And so in this video, I hope they're going to go over a lot of those reasons that I discussed. Again, just to highlight my view on this so far before I watch this video, I think boundaries are necessary in situations where people are dangerous to you and will hurt you, and they are not necessary in situations where you're with someone who will not hurt you and is not dangerous to you. And so I'm just going to kind of review this video. Now, this idea that boundaries are not necessary in marriage is kind of a hot take. That's not something that is super common to say in the either A, marriage therapy world, or B, any kind of relational setting that you have. Boundaries are big, and they're usually emphasized as a good thing, which again, I agree that in a lot of situations, boundaries are good. I just don't think marriage is one of those situations. So let's get into this and see what Dr. Becky has to say, as well as this panel of women that we have here. So there are three wives present on this video that you're going to see. There's Jeremy Pryor hosting the event, and then they're reviewing a video by Dr. Becky. Let's see kind of what their worldview is on this and what the reaction to her words are.
So you've hit loggerheads with your husband. You've made a request. It's very reasonable. You've done it multiple times. You've explained what you want. He's not doing it. What do you do? Is there another lever you can pull to make clear this is a really big deal? I'm not going to back down. And so she's like, here's what a boundary sounds like.
Hey, the last couple of weeks, we talked about you getting home at 7 or trying to, you keep getting home at 9. Look, I don't want to end up in that place again where then I get tired and I get resentful and we get in this fight. I just want to be very, very clear. I would love to have dinner with you tonight. I really would. And I know for me, if you're not home by 7, cooking together and having that connected moment, it just is not going to then happen in a way that feels good to me. So if you get home by 7 tonight, I'm so excited that we can have dinner together. And if you come home at 9, I get it. You will probably find me having already had a bowl of cereal and then reading in my bed, and I won't be able to make dinner, and we can talk about it again next week. So it's literally laying out what I will do. And then let's say my husband does get home at 9. I might still be upset. I mean, I'd be like, this is such a bummer, but I'm not going to feel so resentful. I'm not going to feel so angry because I laid out 2 situations based on my needs. And either way, I have kind of a path I can walk down that's within my control.
I like that a lot. Okay.
Okay, before we get Jeremy's reaction to this, by the way, for those of you guys who want to see the video that you just heard and you want to follow along with the video content that we're producing, you can follow us on YouTube to get the free video content, but you can also go subscribe to the show through the link in every show notes episode or on our website, anchor.fm/Seth Hensley. You can click that and then subscribe to the show and you'll get the video on whatever podcast platform you use. Actually, I think it's just Spotify. So if you're a Spotify user, subscribe to the show and then you can get the video content. What we're producing early. If you go to YouTube, you'll get it free, but it'll come out, 3 or 4 days after the subscribers get access to it. So if you want to see that, go ahead and subscribe there. But again, there's links in the show notes. Usually if there's not there, you can just go to anchor.fm/Seth-Hensley, Hensley, and you can subscribe there to get early access to the videos. But so far that Dr. Becky Kennedy here, and again, whenever I react to these videos, I'm not condemning people. Like these people probably do great work and are awesome people. But I do want to give you an alternate perspective to the approach that they're presenting in these videos when I don't agree with it, because I was under the impression when I was 18, when I was your all's age, 18 to 24, I was under the impression, and kind of still am, that there seems to be only one Christian way to do marriage. And that is really not true, guys. Just because a pastor or an expert or somebody who's got a great relationship with the Lord recommends an approach to marriage to you, that does not make that approach A, the right way for you, or B, the only good way to do marriage. And that's something I really want you guys to get in your minds as you approach your marriage season. Just because I say it, just because I've done 270 podcasts and written books and things, does not mean that I have the approach that's going to work for you. And just because Dr. Becky Kennedy, who probably no doubt has her PhD, maybe several, in counseling psychology or family therapy or something, just because she's done all of that work, that's way more work than I've done, does not mean that it has the answer for you and the marriage that God is calling you to. And so you just have to see what works for you. And again, I say this several times on the show, but measure the advice you're being given against Scripture, your own personal experience, and the experience and advice of those mentors in your life who are wiser and older than yourself. That's how you determine if an approach is something that you want to adopt in your own marriage. Do those 3 things. Whatever Dr. Becky says, whatever I say, whatever Jeremy Pryor says, whatever the next person says that you respect, measure their marriage advice against Scripture, your own personal experience and preferences, and the advice of wiser mentors in your life. That's what you've got to do before you adopt something or consider it a true, statement or something that you should implement in your own life. Measure it against those 3 things, and I think that you will end up in a better situation than you would be if you just took the advice of any Christian that you meet, because there's lots of bad advice coming from pulpits, denominations, congregations, Christians. There's lots of bad advice out there coming from good people. That's my point. Okay, so good people have bad advice sometimes, and you just have to weed through it. So again, measure those measure the advice you're being given against those three things: Scripture, your own personal experience, and the advice and wisdom of those people you respect most in your life. And I think you'll find yourself in a situation that you want to be in. And so, reacting to what Dr. Becky just said, she presented a scenario where her husband was getting home at a later hour than she preferred. He was getting home at 9 o'clock. She wanted him home at 7 so they could have dinner together. And spend some quality time together after a long workday. And because he wasn't doing that, because he was not doing what she desired, she set a boundary, what she calls a boundary, or will call a boundary, I assume, in the future of this video, so that she could control the situation, and so she could control the outcome and make sure that she was getting what she wanted out of this relationship and what she needed out of this relationship, and that is time with her husband. So she basically said, I'm going to eat cereal and go to bed if you're not home by 7. That's basically what she said. She said, I'm not going to spend time with you. I'm not going to cook dinner for you. I'm not going to cook dinner for the family. I'm going to go to bed if you're not home by 7 o'clock. And that was the boundary that she's going to enforce in her own marriage. Here's why I don't think boundaries are A, necessary, and B, good for my marriage personally. Those two people, Dr. Becky and her husband, to me, based on the way she presented that, seem to be on opposite teams. They do not seem to be on the same team. They seem to be each pursuing their own personal interests and demanding that their own way is done, or the highway should be taken by the partner. So maybe I'm misreading the situation. If you disagree with me, reach out and let me know through the link in the show notes, and I would love to hear your perspective on this issue. But this is my reaction. She's treating her husband like A, he doesn't care about her, B, he does not want to do what she wants, C, they are not on the same team together, and D, she has to basically treat him as an enemy, and not an enemy. She has to treat him as somebody she has to enforce boundaries with in order to get the relational connection she wants. And let's say her husband, did all those things, was getting home at 9 o'clock, which, wow, if you ask me, that's not a good way to live for any, sustained period of time. You need to be spending way more time together than getting home at 9 o'clock allows. And so if her husband is actually doing that, I think that's an issue that needs to be remedied. But let's say that he was doing that. And let's say that she had, like she said, presented this to him, hey, I want to spend more time with you, and he was still getting home at 9 o'clock instead of 7 or whatever. He's really not on her. He doesn't seem to be on his wife's team. He's not. She's given him feedback. He doesn't seem to be, taking that to heart or putting that into consideration. He doesn't seem to be, even trying to. If he's not even trying to change his routines and habits in order to better serve his spouse, he doesn't seem to be on the same team. He seems to be pursuing his own personal interests, right? And so the wife, Dr. Becky Kennedy here, or whoever she was talking about in this scenario, is not feeling like she has sufficient quality time with her husband. And so she now has to treat him like a child. She now has to enforce a boundary because he is not on her team. Boundaries are necessary when someone is not on your team and will sort of take advantage of you in order to get what they want. That's when a boundary is necessary. So in the parenting-child relationship, boundaries are necessary because kids will try to do whatever they can, however they can, to get whatever they want when they want it, right? They don't care about, hurting other people's feelings. They don't care about rules. They don't care about or understand why they're being asked to do certain things. They just want what they want, and they want it now, and they're going to try and get that however they can. So even if it involves hurting other people. So boundaries are definitely necessary in the parent-child relationship. Boundaries are definitely necessary in workplace relationships. For example, your boss will probably, if you have no boundaries, ask so much of you that you're burnt out and have nothing left to give your family when you get home. So a boundary is necessary in the workplace relationship. But again, let's try and put marriage into the boundary, approach. Is your wife someone who's going to hurt you in order to get something she wants? Because if she is, she's probably not a good wife, and you probably shouldn't have married her. And so, a marriage is a relationship you enter with somebody who is on your team. You're becoming one flesh. What's good for one of you is good for the other. And you're sort of meshing your lives together and removing anything that would get in the way of your connection. And so if you married somebody like that, boundaries become suddenly totally irrelevant. You don't need to enforce a boundary with somebody because they have your best interest at heart, and they're not going to hurt you in order to get what they want. And so that's kind of why I think this is just a flawed scenario, and that the connection between the person in this scenario, the wife in this scenario, and the husband in this scenario is not good, because he's staying out late even after she said, this bothers me. He's not taking her interests to heart. And she is having to treat him like a child that she has to enforce boundaries with in order to get something she wants and needs. And she's trying to take control of the situation and sort of get what she wants no matter what. So it seems like they're just fighting each other. It seems like they're opposing each other on opposite teams. It doesn't seem like they're on the same side. And so again, I think whenever there's a boundary, that communicates that the relationship that boundary is a part of is, the people in it are on opposite teams. They're on opposite teams, and they're basically, fighting each other. Their wills are in conflict all the time. And they're both fighting not for what's best for the team, but what they want, what each individual in that relationship wants. So that's why I don't think boundaries are a good thing. But let's go ahead and share the screen again and see what Jeremy Pryor's reaction is to this, as well as the three women on this panel, one of which is his wife. So let's see kind of what they have to say.
So I want to talk about this one first.
I almost like I can't really understand what she's even saying, because I don't understand her framework at all. I've never thought of the word boundaries when it comes to my children or my marriage. To answer the question of like, what tools do we have in our tool belt about like not getting resentful? I think I really agree with what Kristen said about the meeting. I think that's a great place to be. I think another tool is like having a mission, because as a team, if you are trying to accomplish something, if you're using the sports analogy, you're trying to like get a touchdown or score a point or whatever, then you both understand that that's the goal, that's the thing you're working towards. And so you might have conversations about how to get there, or like which one of you is going to do this or that so that you can get to the end zone. But it's very much like a collaborative conversation, and conversation, I think, probably is the key about like how to achieve that goal or be on that mission. And then having the meeting as like a regrouping, like how was that, like the post game meeting or something, like, okay, so how was that? How'd that go? Well, I mean, I feel like that's where you could say like, well, you did come 2 hours late, so that made it a little stressful. I had to kind of keep the kids occupied while I was waiting for you, or, whatever the thing is, to be able to say those things in that place where maybe your emotions aren't riled up, it's not in the moment. It's like post game meeting where you can say like, I think that maybe if we tried this or this, it might be better. Can we try that next time? So it's more of like a conversation to me than like a boundary or like a threat that I'm holding over someone's head. Or
Okay, so notice her April Pryor's reaction to this. She's used the word team like 5 times, because again, she's approaching this from the idea that her and her husband are on the same team. And the couple that gave the scenario, that Dr. Becky gave the scenario about this couple who the wife is saying, I need this, you're not giving me this, and so I'm going to draw a boundary in the sand here, and I'm going to say, if you do this, I'm not going to make dinner, and I'm not going to be up to visit with you when you get home. I'm just going to leave you and go to bed. In that scenario, they're not on the same team, because they both did not have the goal of connection. The wife's actually saying, I'm going to become more disconnected from you if you do this again. And the husband is not spending time with his wife at all, it sounds like. And so the connection wasn't even a goal in their marriage. Compare that to what April Pryor just said of a couple having the goal of connection, a mission. She used the word mission because Family Teams does that a lot. A mission that you're moving towards this direction as a couple. You're moving in the same direction, and so basically, your task in that scenario is to just get rid of anything that gets in the way of that. So let's go back to the first scenario that Dr. Becky gave of a couple who is fighting over when they come home, how much time they're spending in the home and how much time in the home they're spending together. Let's change something. Instead of, whatever goal they have in getting married, let's change the fact that they had and say that they both agreed that connection was their goal, and that anything that got in the way of connection, they would throw out the window. Okay, here's what the husband would be doing differently if that was his goal. If connection was the husband's goal, he would not have to be asked to get home at a reasonable hour. He would be spending as much of his time as possible with his spouse. Number two, the wife would not be basically, number one, having to tell her husband that, and she would not be, denying connection at all by saying, I'm going to bed early if you come home late. She would be, spending as much time as she could with her husband. And she wouldn't be, denying the family and the union things like meals or time spent with one another because she didn't get her way. She would be doing whatever she could to maintain the connection. Okay? And I think the attitude, the mission, the goal, the purpose that April Pryor just described in a marriage, having a mission together, the goal of connection is the words that Danny Silk would use, is a much better foundation to have going into a marriage because, again, you're not on opposite teams. You're not fighting for your own individual wants. You don't have husbands fighting to pursue their own passions and wives fighting for what they want against each other. Husband and wives fighting against each other to individually get what they want. You have two people who have this same goal, that is connection, fighting to get rid of anything that gets in the way of that goal. So if the couple, let's say that in this scenario, they weren't having enough time together, the husband would be fighting to get home early. And the wife would be fighting to spend whatever time he was in the home with him, right? She wouldn't be saying, I'm going to bed. She wouldn't be saying, I'm not cooking dinner with you. She would be saying, I'm going to do whatever I need to do in order to spend time with you and preserve our connection and strengthen it. And so the couple in that first scenario, they just did not have that attitude. And sadly, I think that's what a lot of couples have. They go into marriage with two separate goals. The husband wants this, the wife wants this. And instead of fighting for what should be their unified goal of connection, they fight for their own individual goals. And those individual goals are often in opposition to one another. And so before you know it, they find themselves on opposite teams. And that's not a union. That's not a healthy marriage. That's not becoming one, as Paul talks about. So it's just, I think this attitude we have is really important for you guys who are young believers going into marriage. You need to make sure that you have the goal of connection with your spouse. If you are with somebody who literally says, I don't want to really spend all my time with you. I just want to spend some, this portion of my week with you, and then the rest of the rest of my week I want to spend pursuing this goal that I have. If you're marrying somebody like that, expect to wake up in the situation Dr. Becky described one day, because you don't even have the goal of connection with your partner. If your partner does not want to connect with you and is not willing to get rid of anything that gets in the way of connection with you, by golly, you're going to find yourself on opposite teams. Because if you want connection with your partner and she don't want connection with you, son, she's going to be fighting for her own, trophies while you're trying to spend time with her. And that is a recipe for a bad marriage. And so you just need to make sure that you guys are unified in commitment, in purpose, in vision before you tie the knot. And don't tie the knot or interact with somebody, I would say, in any intimate setting who does not have those goals in common with you and that determination and commitment in common with you. So yeah, good reaction to the video so far. Let's continue to see what they have to say, though. That was April Pryor's reaction, one of the women on the panel. There are two more, so let's see what they have to say, if anything.
Or I think one way I really struggle is with manipulation. So I very much in my flesh want to say, if you don't do this, then I'm going to do this, or other way around, I'm just going to, if you make me feel resentful, then I'm going to make you pay for it or something like that. And so I think in my flesh, I can kind of bend towards that. But I think if we're trying to work together as a team to accomplish something, we both want that thing, then we're going to want to make sure the other person is successful at what they're doing.
Yeah, that's helpful. Yeah, it's difficult to find those Like how do we work through resentment? And a lot of this is like you said, April, it's a framework problem. So basically the kind of modern Western marriage is we fell in love, and we're in this as individuals to get different needs met from a partner. Like that's kind of the framework. And so we if you're I'm sharing very honestly what my needs are, you're sharing very honestly what your needs are, and it's an ongoing negotiation to try to make sure that nobody is kind of getting getting way more than the other, like that we're respecting each other as adults in our attempts to like extract from this union what each of us as individuals needs. And that is so fundamentally different than leading a team and saying we have a goal and collectively we're on the same side of the table trying to achieve something. And as we do that, because we have the same goal, there's going to be the question that is going to settle disputes is how does it serve our goal as a team? Like, what are we trying to, like, it's not like just your needs met or my needs met. We're trying to accomplish something together. I think this is so different. And part of why I wanted to bring it up is because there is so much conversation around boundaries in our culture psychologically. And it's in this framework of you're in these relationships to get individual needs met. And I am trying to understand, number one, is that appropriate language for a family team? And number two, if it's not, how do we deal with the resentment that could happen when you are feeling constantly like you're not getting your needs met? There's also kind of like a missing party. And when you're in a system, let's say you have a coach who is leading a team and is really causing issues in the team, and multiple team members are noticing it, multiple people are frustrated, all these assistant coaches. He doesn't have absolute power. In any kind of coaching scenario, you can always go and talk to the principal of the school, right? You can talk to the president of the university. There are people above the head coach even. And one of the things we do every year during our festival, we have a festival season where we celebrate Sukkot. We watch this movie called Ushpizin, and in that movie, it's about a couple, and it's a modern day movie, but the couple are ultra Orthodox Jews, and basically through the course of the movie, they become completely like their horns just lock over issues, and eventually it gets so bad that the wife goes to the rabbi, and it's like very serious, and she's making her case to the rabbi, and the rabbi then goes to the husband and says, "Hey, I told your wife to go and spend some time with her parents while we work out." And so it was demonstrating within a community that when you have a lot of authority given to the husband also has to be under authority somehow. And we don't really have that mostly in the Christian world. I think this is really difficult on families. So that I'm one of the things I'm teasing out is that a necessary part of a structure where this could happen? Because we've all heard situations in which, like, a husband goes off the rails. And so just to say that the wife has no recourse ever because they're a team, that seems like it's going too far as well. But how do you preserve what God has designed for the family in a context where that's happening?
Really good video. Really good video. We did not get to hear the other two women on the panel talk, but guys, just my reaction. But marriages where the husband is domineering and tyrannical, and just insists upon having his way in the marriage, and basically demands that everyone in the family unit bend to his will to do what he wants. That is, again, a guy who got married trying to fulfill his own, trying to get something from the marriage and the family that he wants and only he wants. He doesn't have a family goal. His family doesn't have a goal that they're all unified and working toward. What his family has is a bunch of individuals fighting to pursue their own goals. And because those goals are in conflict with one another, the family unit is, a war zone constantly. And it's totally disunified and fragmented, okay? When you get married with the goal of connection as a family unit, when you get married with the goal of following Christ as a family unit, when you get married with the goal of having good relationships with one another as a family unit and your environment and community, suddenly you're all on the same team. You're all fighting for the same prize. You're all fighting for the same goal. So this is why it's really important, guys, in your selection of a mate, that you pick somebody who is unified with you in your vision and your goal. Make sure that they are fighting for connection with you, fighting for connection with your children, fighting for connection with the Lord. If they're not fighting for those things, you're going to find yourself pulling basically in opposite directions like these people are. And here's the point I want to make about boundaries, guys. Here's the point I want to make about boundaries. Boundaries are only necessary when you have two people who want opposite things, who are fighting for different goals, because they'll hurt each other in the pursuit of those goals. And suddenly boundaries become necessary and important in order to keep either party from getting hurt. But change your framework, change your scenario here. And if the couple is fighting for connection, if they're fighting for the same goal, suddenly they're on the same team fighting for the same goal. They have double the strength, pulling in one unified direction. And anything that gets in the way of that is their enemy. They're not fighting one another. They're not opposed to one another. They're unified in vision. And suddenly boundaries become irrelevant and even harmful. Because what's the point of a boundary where you have two people who are running towards the same goal? They're not going to step on one another's toes doing that. Again, boundaries become necessary when you have two people pulling in opposite directions, trying to get their own wishes for, things that they want in and of their individual selves. That's when boundaries become necessary and important. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I hope I've given you something to think about. Again, I'm not saying I have the answer. I'm not saying that in all cases boundaries are not necessary in marriage, but please reach out and let me know your perspective on this issue. Hope you've enjoyed mine. Hope it's given you, some kernel of wisdom that you can pull out of this and implement in your future marriage. Again, though, I would love to hear from you and hear your thoughts on this episode. If you disagree or have an alternate perspective or want to tell me your story or how what I said impacted you or you've seen in your life, reach out and let me know through the link in the show notes. We have a personalized audio voice message button. Just click the link that says send the show a voice message, hit the record button, send me something. I would love to hear that in your own voice. I like hearing from you on social media, private message and stuff, and even comments on Facebook and stuff, but I would really prefer to hear your own voice. It would make me feel super connected to you and make this podcasting system two-way. So thank you guys so much for listening today, and we will talk to you next time.